Have you ever made a split-second decision that changed 3 lives forever? Marcus Thompson had no idea that saying yes to a stranger on a crowded Saturday morning would test everything he believed about second chances, family, and the thin line between kindness and destiny. The Morning Blend sat on the corner of Southeast Hawthorne and 34th, a Portland institution that had survived 3 recessions, 2 ownership changes, and countless trends. Its exposed brick walls held decades of coffee stains and conversation. The espresso machine, a vintage La Marzocco that the owner refused to replace, hissed and gurgled like a living thing. On weekends, especially when Portland's relentless gray finally broke for sunshine, the place packed wall to wall with the neighborhood's entire ecosystem. Students hunched over laptops, couples on first dates trying too hard, families with strollers blocking the narrow aisles, retirees reading actual newspapers like it was still 1987. Late March had delivered one of those rare mornings when the Pacific Northwest remembered it could be beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, catching dust motes and steam from a dozen ceramic mugs. Every table was full, every seat taken. The line at the counter snaked back to the door. Marcus Thompson sat at the corner table by the window, table 7, though nobody called it that except the staff. He'd claimed this spot every Saturday morning for the past 3 years, ever since his divorce papers were finalized and he needed somewhere to rebuild normal. The table had become sacred ground. 2 chairs, chipped formica surface, view of the street where joggers and dog walkers passed in an endless parade. His daughter Emily sat across from him, 6 years old and vibrating with the particular energy only first graders possessed after a full week of institutional containment. Marcus was 32, black, lean in the way former athletes get when they stop training but maintain the habits. He wore a faded Portland Trail Blazers hoodie and jeans that had seen better years. His hands, rough from years of emergency medicine work, now softened slightly by 4 years of teaching, wrapped around a mug of black coffee he'd barely touched. He wasn't actually drinking it. The coffee was a prop, an excuse to occupy the table while Emily worked through her chocolate chip pancakes and whatever story currently dominated her universe. Right now that story involved a hamster. Emily's hands waved in elaborate gestures, syrup-sticky fingers tracing invisible paths through the air. Her hair, twisted into 2 puffs her grandmother had managed before dropping her off last night, bounced with each emphatic word. She'd inherited Marcus's dark eyes and her mother's expressiveness, a combination that made lying to her impossible and bedtime negotiations exhausting. And then Cheeto escaped during show and tell and ran under Mrs. Faith's desk, and she screamed so loud, "Daddy, like this." Emily demonstrated with a shriek that turned 3 heads at nearby tables. And everybody started looking for him, and Jaden said maybe Cheeto went into the ventilation system and would end up in the cafeteria, but I said, "Hamsters can't climb metal," and then... Marcus smiled, nodding at appropriate intervals. But his attention had drifted. Movement near the entrance caught his eye. A young woman stood just inside the door, scanning the crowded cafe with an expression Marcus recognized from his paramedic days, the look of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will, one crack away from shattering completely. She was maybe early 20s, white, with blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She wore jeans and a dark green jacket despite the warming weather. What stopped Marcus cold were the crutches. She moved with practiced efficiency despite them, navigating through the narrow spaces between tables like someone who'd learned to make their body smaller, less intrusive. But it was her face that held his attention, determination mixed with something that looked like barely contained desperation. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging every occupied seat, every table where strangers sat absorbed in their own worlds. She approached a table near the door where a couple sat close together, clearly on a date, hands intertwined across the surface. Marcus watched her speak to them, saw the woman shake her head firmly without even making eye contact. The young woman on crutches nodded, apologized with a small dip of her head, and moved to another table where a man sat alone, papers and laptop spread in territorial claim across every available inch. Again, refusal. This time the man didn't even look up from his screen. Marcus saw her shoulders slump infinitesimally, saw the way she bit her lower lip as if physically holding back words or tears or both. She stood in the middle of the cafe now, between tables, people flowing around her like water around a stone. Lost. Alone. About to give up on something that seemed, from the naked vulnerability on her face, desperately important. For a brief moment their gazes met across the crowded space. Marcus saw vulnerability there, hope, and a deep sadness that seemed to radiate from somewhere central and untouchable. She took a breath, adjusted her crutches, and started walking toward them. "Excuse me." The voice was soft when she reached their corner table, but steady underneath, like someone who'd practiced the words. Marcus looked up fully now. Up close he could see her eyes were brown, red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently or fighting not to. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is probably strange, but would you mind if I shared this table with you?" Emily had stopped mid-sentence, pancake-laden fork frozen halfway to her mouth, staring with unfiltered 6-year-old curiosity. The young woman continued, and now Marcus heard the emotion trembling underneath the steady surface. "The cafe is completely full, and I really need to be here today. It's very important to me." Marcus stood immediately. No thought required, no internal debate. His body moved before his brain caught up. Muscle memory from 5 years of responding to 911 calls, from being trained to recognize crisis in whatever form it wore. He pulled out the empty chair across from Emily. "Of course. Please sit down." The relief that washed over the young woman's face was so immediate and overwhelming that Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. She carefully settled into the chair, propped her crutches against the wall beside her with the kind of precision that spoke to long practice. Thank you so much." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm Rebecca." "I'm Marcus. This is my daughter Emily." "Hi." Emily's enthusiasm was undimmed by the interruption. "I'm 6 3/4. Well, technically 6 7 months, but 3/4 sounds cooler. Are you going to order pancakes? They have really good chocolate chip ones, but Daddy says I can't have them every single week because then they wouldn't be special anymore, which I think is wrong because pancakes are always special." Rebecca smiled, and despite the sadness that clung to her like a second skin, the smile reached her eyes. "I love pancakes, but I think I'll start with coffee today." Marcus caught the attention of their usual server, who raised an eyebrow at the addition to their table, but came over without comment. Rebecca ordered coffee and a croissant, her hands twisting together in her lap beneath the table where Emily couldn't see, but Marcus could. As the server left, Emily launched back into her story with renewed energy, now directing it at their new table-mate. Rebecca listened with genuine attention that surprised Marcus. Most adults defaulted to performative interest when children talked, nodding and making non-committal sounds while their eyes glazed over. Rebecca actually engaged, asking follow-up questions about Cheeto's personality, whether Mrs. Faith had recovered from her scare, how Emily thought the hamster felt about being the star of such dramatic events. What nobody in that cafe knew, what Marcus couldn't have known as he watched Rebecca laugh at Emily's description of Jaden crawling under desks, was that Rebecca Hayes had driven 45 minutes from Vancouver, Washington that morning to sit in this specific cafe on this specific day. Because 2 years ago, this was the last place she'd been truly happy, before the explosion that took everything. Marcus had worked as a paramedic for 5 years, responding to Portland's worst emergencies. He'd learned to see past what people said to what they needed. And Rebecca Hayes wasn't just asking for a seat, she was asking to survive this day. They'd been sitting together for about 15 minutes when Rebecca carefully set down her coffee cup. She looked at both of them with an expression Marcus couldn't quite decipher, gratitude mixed with something deeper, more painful. "I want to tell you both something." She paused, gathering words. "The reason I needed to be here today specifically, it's because today is my birthday. I'm 23 today." Emily's eyes went wide with pure delight. "It's your birthday?" And without a moment's hesitation, Without asking permission or feeling any self-consciousness, Emily burst into song. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Rebecca, happy birthday to you. Marcus immediately joined in, his deeper voice blending with his daughter's enthusiastic, slightly off-key soprano. The woman at the next table glanced over, smiled, and joined in for the final line. An older couple across the cafe added their voices too. By the time they finished, half their corner of the cafe was singing. Rebecca had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling through them. Marcus saw something shift in her expression, a crack in whatever armor she'd been wearing. That was... She wiped at her eyes with trembling fingers. That was the most beautiful thing anyone's done for me in a very long time. Thank you, both of you. Everyone needs birthday songs, Emily declared with absolute conviction, as if this were a fundamental law of the universe. Then her face lit up with another idea. Daddy, we need to get her a birthday cake. You can't have a birthday without cake. It's basically illegal. Oh no, please. Rebecca started to protest, shaking her head. Marcus glanced toward the display case near the counter where the cafe kept their fresh pastries and small cakes. They actually make really good cakes here. Would that be okay? It's your birthday. You should definitely have cake. You've both been so incredibly kind already. I don't want to be any trouble. You're not trouble at all. Marcus kept his voice gentle. Really, please let us celebrate with you. Despite Rebecca's continued protests, Marcus excused himself and went to the counter. He returned a few minutes later carrying a small chocolate cake with vanilla buttercream frosting and a single candle. The owner, who'd been watching the whole thing, had thrown in the candle for free with a wink. When Marcus lit the candle, several people at nearby tables noticed. Someone started singing again, and soon their entire corner of the cafe had joined in for a second round. Rebecca closed her eyes, and Marcus saw her lips move, making a wish. She blew out the candle. A small ripple of applause spread through the space. Okay, birthday girl gets the first piece and the biggest piece, Emily announced, taking charge of the cake distribution with serious authority. That's the rule. Daddy told me when I turned 6. As they shared the cake, something shifted in the atmosphere. The sweetness of the moment, the unexpected kindness from strangers seemed to crack open something in Rebecca that had been locked tight. This cafe, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, staring down at her plate. This was my family's place, our Saturday morning tradition, exactly like yours. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He glanced at Emily, who had stopped eating her cake, her intuitive child sense picking up on the weight of what was coming. Rebecca looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. Me, my little sister Kennedy, and our parents. We live just a few blocks from here, in a small apartment above a bookstore on 32nd. She paused. Marcus watched her hands begin to tremble around her fork. My dad was a firefighter at Station 14. My mom was a pediatric nurse at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the effort it took. We never had much money, but Saturday mornings here at the Morning Blend, these were the happiest times of my entire life. Kennedy would always order strawberry waffles with extra syrup. My dad made these terrible jokes that made my mom groan but made us laugh. My mom would steal bites of everyone's food, claiming she was quality checking our choices. A small, sad smile crossed Rebecca's face. We'd sit at a table just like this one, and for those few hours, nothing else mattered. My dad's long shifts, my mom's exhaustion from night rotations, Kennedy's struggles with algebra, none of it mattered. We were just us. Marcus reached across the table instinctively, placing his hand gently over hers. What happened, Rebecca? She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. 2 years ago, there was a gas leak in our apartment building. The landlord had been warned multiple times about the old, corroded pipes in the basement. He always said he'd get to it next month. Next month. Next month. Her voice fractured, breaking into pieces. We were all asleep when it happened. The explosion. She paused, and Marcus tightened his grip on her hand. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The entire building had collapsed. I was trapped under concrete and steel beams for almost 6 hours before the rescue team could reach me. Her breathing was ragged now. My left leg was completely crushed. The doctor said there was no way to save it. They had to amputate just below the knee. Emily's eyes were wide, shimmering with tears she didn't fully understand but felt completely. My parents and Kennedy. Rebecca's voice shattered completely. They didn't make it out. They died in the collapse. Kennedy was only 14 years old. She wanted to be a veterinarian because she loved every single animal she ever met. She used to bring home stray cats, nurse injured birds back to health, cry over roadkill on our street. She had the biggest heart. The tears were streaming down Rebecca's face now. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. And my parents? They spent their entire adult lives saving other people. My dad ran into burning buildings. My mom fought to save sick children every single day. But they couldn't save themselves. They couldn't save Kennedy. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They couldn't save me. Before Marcus could respond, Emily slipped silently out of her chair and walked around the table. Without saying a word, she wrapped her small arms around Rebecca and hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry your family died," Emily said softly, her voice carrying that pure, unfiltered empathy that only children seemed capable of. "That's the saddest thing I ever heard. But you're not alone right now. We're here with you." Rebecca pulled Emily closer and sobbed into her hair. Marcus came around too, placing a comforting hand on Rebecca's shoulder. They stayed like that for what felt like a long time, 3 people who'd been strangers less than an hour ago, now connected by unexpected kindness and shared understanding of loss. The cafe continued its rhythm around them. The espresso machine hissed. Conversations hummed. Sunlight moved across the floor, but at table 7, time had compressed into something else entirely. When Rebecca finally composed herself, she looked at them both with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart like that." "You don't need to apologize," Marcus said firmly. "Not for grief, not ever." Rebecca wiped her face with a napkin, taking a shaky breath. "I live with my aunt now, up in Vancouver, Washington. She took me in after I got out of rehab for my leg, but it doesn't feel like home. Nothing feels like home anymore." She looked around the cafe, her gaze landing on different tables, different corners. "Today is my birthday, and all I wanted was to come back here, to this cafe, to feel close to them again. This was where we were happiest." She paused, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "I thought if I could just sit here at one of these tables, maybe I could feel like they weren't completely gone. But when I got here and saw how crowded it was, I almost left. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to work up the courage to come inside. And then, when those first people said no..." She looked at Marcus, vulnerability naked on her face. "I was about to give up, and then you said yes. You let me sit here, you sang to me, you got me cake." Her voice broke again. "You made me feel like I mattered on a day when I felt completely alone in the world." "You do matter," Emily said with absolute certainty, still standing beside Rebecca's chair. "And you're not alone. You have us now." Marcus smiled at his daughter's pure heart. He thought about how they'd been coming to this cafe for 3 years, ever since his divorce was finalized. How Saturday mornings had become their sacred time, their moment of peace in the chaos of single parenthood and shared custody negotiations. "She's right," Marcus said. "You don't have to be alone today. We were planning to go to Laurelhurst Park this afternoon. Nothing fancy, just our usual Saturday routine. You're welcome to join us if you'd like." Rebecca looked surprised. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on your time together." "You're not intruding," Marcus said. "We'd like you to come. Really." Rebecca hesitated for only a moment before nodding. I would really love that. Thank you. They spent the rest of their time at the cafe talking about smaller things. Emily's school, the hamster saga conclusion. Cheeto was found in the art supply closet, alive and well. Rebecca's work as a freelance graphic designer. The heaviness lifted slightly, though it never fully disappeared. Rebecca asked questions about Marcus's teaching job, laughed when Emily described his tendency to get paint on his clothes despite years of experience, shared that she'd always loved art, but never pursued it professionally. When they finally left the morning blend around noon, stepping out into sunshine that felt almost aggressive after Portland's months of gray, Marcus gave Rebecca directions to Laurelhurst Park and his phone number in case she got lost. She programmed it into her phone with fingers that shook slightly. Whether from emotion or just the accumulated weight of the morning, Marcus couldn't tell. They arrived at the park separately. Marcus and Emily in his aging Honda Civic, Rebecca in a small blue Toyota with Washington plates. The park sprawled across 31 acres of southeast Portland, all rolling lawns and massive old trees that had witnessed a century of the city's transformations. On a Saturday this warm, it was predictably crowded. Families claiming picnic tables, dogs chasing frisbees, teenagers clustered near the basketball courts projecting elaborate disinterest in everything except each other. Emily made a beeline for the playground, her energy apparently infinite. Marcus and Rebecca settled on a bench with a view of the swing set where Emily was already pumping her legs, trying to touch the sky. For a few minutes they sat in comfortable silence, watching Emily and the parade of park life around them. Then Rebecca spoke. "How long have you been doing the Saturday morning tradition?" 3 years now, Marcus said. "Since my divorce was finalized. Emily was 3 when her mom and I split up." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly. "That must have been hard." Marcus nodded, surprised at how easy it felt to talk to her. "It was. But it was also necessary. My ex-wife Angela and we married young, 22, right out of college. We thought we wanted the same things, but we didn't." He paused, watching Emily jump off the swing and run toward the monkey bars. "Angela's an artist, a free spirit. She wanted spontaneity, adventure, last-minute road trips to the coast. I'm more of a homebody. I like routines, quiet mornings, knowing what's coming. When Emily was born, we both tried so hard to make it work. But trying to be someone you're not." He trailed off. "It's exhausting." "That sounds harder than anger," Rebecca observed. "It was," Marcus admitted, "because there was no one to blame. No betrayal, no dramatic fight, just the sad realization that loving someone isn't always enough if you want fundamentally different lives." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Where is she now?" "Seattle. She's a curator at a gallery up there. She visits twice a month and calls Emily regularly. The divorce was amicable. We did mediation instead of lawyers. I got primary custody because my teaching job is more stable, and Emily needed that consistency. Angela understands that. She's not a bad person or a bad mother. We were just bad at being married to each other." "You're a teacher?" Something lit up in Rebecca's eyes. "Middle school art," Marcus said, and couldn't help but smile. "It's chaos and creativity and hormones all mixed together in one explosive package, but I love it." "Art teacher." Rebecca's smile widened. "That's perfect. You have that energy, patient, observant, creative." "I wasn't always a teacher," Marcus said, and found himself sharing more than he'd planned. "I worked as a paramedic for 5 years before this. EMT first, then paramedic. I was 23 when I started, thought I was going to save the world one emergency at a time." "What made you stop?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "I saw too much. Car accidents where kids didn't make it, overdoses that could have been prevented, shootings over nothing, arguments about parking spots, someone looking at someone else wrong. After a while the stress got to me. Couldn't sleep, couldn't turn off my brain. Every siren I heard, even on my days off, my heart would start racing." He looked down at his hands. "I started having panic attacks in the middle of shifts. Nothing dramatic, I could hide it, but I knew I was burning out. My supervisor suggested taking some time off, maybe seeing someone. Angela, we were still married then. She wanted me to stick with it. Better pay, better benefits, more respectable than teaching. That was part of why we didn't work. She couldn't understand why I'd want to leave. But you did anyway. I went back to school for my teaching credential, took art classes at Portland State. Art therapy was what kept me sane during the transition, working with my hands, creating things instead of just responding to crises. When I finished my credential and got hired at Bridgeport Middle School, it felt like I could finally breathe again. Rebecca nodded slowly. Art teacher who used to save lives. That's not wasting anything. That's evolution. Something in Marcus's chest loosened at that. Angela had never understood. His mother had been disappointed, thinking he was throwing away his training. Even his friends from the paramedic days had made jokes about him taking the easy path, summers off, short hours. But Rebecca got it. In one sentence, she'd validated 4 years of doubt. They discovered more as the afternoon wore on. They both loved hiking, though Rebecca admitted she hadn't been on a trail since the accident. The prosthetic she'd been fitted with after healing wasn't designed for uneven terrain, and she hadn't had the money or emotional energy to pursue a more advanced one. They both preferred indie films to blockbusters, the kind of small character studies that played at the Clinton Street Theater and living room theaters. They both thought the smell of Portland after rain was the best smell in the world, petrichor mixed with Douglas fir and coffee roasting somewhere in the distance. They both loved Powell's City of Books, getting lost in different sections, and texting each other ridiculous finds from across the store. Wait. They'd never been to Powell's together, but somehow Marcus could already picture it. When evening started creeping in, turning the light golden and long, they finally stood to leave. Emily was filthy, covered in bark dust and grass stains, declaring it the best Saturday ever. In the parking lot, Marcus and Rebecca exchanged phone numbers for real this time, not just directions. "Thank you for today," Rebecca said, her eyes still a bit puffy but genuinely happy for the first time since Marcus had seen her. "You and Emily turned what I thought would be the loneliest, most painful birthday of my life into something beautiful. I'll never forget this." "Same place next Saturday?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with how much he hoped she'd say yes. Rebecca's face lit up. "I would absolutely love that." Marcus's phone buzzed as he buckled Emily into her car seat. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Thank you for sharing your table today." He smiled, saved the contact as Rebecca, and typed back, "Thank you for asking." He started the engine, began pulling out of the parking space. His phone buzzed again, then again. By the time he got Emily home, they'd exchanged a dozen messages. Nothing profound, just observations about the park, a photo Rebecca had taken of a dog that looked like it was smiling, Emily's grass-stained knees, the way the light had hit the trees. After Marcus got Emily bathed and into bed, after he'd read 3 chapters of the book they were working through together and kissed her forehead and turned out the light, he found himself on the couch with his phone, still texting Rebecca. The conversation drifted from light to deeper. She told him about her work, designing logos and websites for small businesses, how she'd had to completely relearn her workflow after the amputation, how she used to pace while brainstorming, sketch standing up at an easel, and now did everything sitting, using a tablet instead of traditional media. It had taken months to adapt, but she'd gotten there. Marcus told her about his students, the kid who'd shown up to class every day for 3 weeks just to work on a single charcoal drawing of his grandmother, the girl who'd discovered she could express her anxiety through abstract painting better than any words, the rewards that didn't show up on standardized tests. Around midnight, Marcus realized he should probably sleep. He had papers to grade tomorrow, lesson plans to finalize. He typed, "I should let you go, but I'm really glad you asked to share our table today." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I almost didn't. I sat in my car for so long, convincing myself it was stupid, that nobody would want a stranger at their table. I'm glad I was brave enough to ask." Marcus stared at that message for a long moment, then typed, "I'm glad you were too. Sleep well, Rebecca." "You too, Marcus. Good night." He set his phone on the coffee table, but sleep didn't come easily. He kept replaying the day, Rebecca's face when she'd revealed her birthday, Emily's spontaneous song, the tears streaming down Rebecca's cheeks, the weight of her story about the explosion, the way she'd smiled when Emily hugged her, the easy conversation at the park, the text messages that had stretched on for hours without either of them noticing. Something had shifted. Marcus couldn't name it yet, couldn't articulate what exactly had changed between the morning and now. But he felt it, the way you feel a storm coming before the first drops of rain. He'd said yes to a stranger at a cafe table. People did that every day. It was basic human decency, nothing remarkable. So why did it feel like he'd just made a decision that would alter the entire trajectory of his life? Marcus finally fell asleep around 2 a.m., his phone still on the coffee table, the screen dark, but somehow still humming with possibility. The following Saturday, Rebecca showed up at the morning blend wearing a nervous smile and a burgundy scarf Marcus hadn't seen before. The moment Emily spotted her through the window, she squealed with delight and bolted from her chair, wrapping her arms around Rebecca's waist before Marcus could even stand. "You came back! I told Daddy you would, but he said maybe you'd be busy, and I said no way," Miss Rebecca promised, "and she keeps promises, right?" Rebecca laughed, the sound lighter than it had been a week ago. "I absolutely keep promises." And just like that, she folded into their Saturday tradition as if she'd always been there. April dissolved into May. The rain returned, then retreated, then returned again in Portland's typical indecisive fashion. Rebecca joined them every weekend without fail. Sometimes they stayed at the cafe for hours, Emily coloring while Marcus and Rebecca talked about everything and nothing. Sometimes they'd walk to Powell's afterward, splitting up to browse different sections and texting each other photos of bizarre book titles they found. Once they drove out to Multnomah Falls, Rebecca insisting she could handle the paved lower trail, and they'd stood together watching the water thunder down 600 feet of basalt cliff while Emily collected interesting rocks. By mid-May, Rebecca mentioned she was thinking about moving back to Portland. Her aunt was supportive, understanding that living an hour away from the one place that felt like home didn't make sense anymore. She'd found a studio apartment 3 blocks from Marcus's place, available June 1st. "I can help you move," Marcus offered immediately. They were sitting on his couch after Emily had gone to bed, watching a documentary about Banksy that neither of them was really paying attention to. "You don't have to do that. I want to." Rebecca looked at him then, something unreadable in her expression. "Okay, thank you." Moving day arrived on a Saturday in early June that threatened rain but never delivered. Marcus recruited 2 teacher friends, David, who taught English and could lift twice his body weight, and Stephen, who taught math and owned a pickup truck. They carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembled furniture from IKEA instructions that may as well have been written in ancient Sumerian, hung pictures on walls that Rebecca had measured and marked with precise graphic designer accuracy. By evening, her studio apartment felt like home. Small but cozy, with afternoon light streaming through west-facing windows. Photos of her family occupied every available surface, her parents laughing at some long-ago barbecue, Kennedy holding a rescued kitten, the 4 of them bundled in winter coats at the coast. Rebecca ordered pizza for everyone. They ate sitting on her new second-hand couch, Emily chattering about how now Miss Rebecca could come to her school art show in 2 weeks, and didn't she want to see the clay sculpture Emily had made that looked sort of like a turtle but was actually supposed to be a dolphin. After David and Stephen left, after Emily fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, Rebecca walked Marcus to the door. "Thank you for today. For everything, really. These past 2 months..." She trailed off, but Marcus understood. These past 2 months had been a lifeline for her, a way back to something resembling life after 2 years of just surviving. What he didn't say, what he was only beginning to admit to himself, was that these past 2 months had been a lifeline for him too. He hadn't realized how much he'd been going through the motions until Rebecca appeared, and suddenly everything had color again. June became July. Rebecca integrated herself fully into their lives with an ease that felt both natural and miraculous. She knew Emily's schedule better than Angela did, knew that Wednesdays were library days, so Emily needed her book bag, that Fridays were PE, so she needed sneakers instead of her light-up shoes that weren't allowed in the gym. She knew Marcus graded papers better with Miles Davis or John Coltrane playing low in the background. She knew their coffee orders by heart, had become friends with the baristas at the Morning Blend, who now automatically started Rebecca's Americano when they saw the three of them walk in. She'd become the person Marcus texted first when something funny happened during his workday, like when a student had accidentally glued his phone to his desk during a collage project. The person whose opinion he valued on whether the new restaurant on Division was worth trying. The person whose laugh made his entire day better, whose presence felt as essential as breathing. Marcus realized he was in love with her on a Tuesday afternoon in late July. They were at a different coffee shop, not the Morning Blend, somewhere new Rebecca wanted to try on Belmont. Emily was at Angela's for her midweek dinner visit. Just Marcus and Rebecca sitting across from each other, Rebecca laughing at something ridiculous that had happened during a client video call. Her head tilted back, afternoon light catching her hair just right, and Marcus felt it hit him with the force of a physical blow. Not attraction. He'd felt that for weeks, maybe months, had been studiously ignoring it. This was deeper. This was the sudden, terrifying knowledge that he'd crossed some invisible line and there was no going back. He was in love with Rebecca Hayes, completely, irreversibly, in the way that changed the entire architecture of a life. And he couldn't tell her. She'd been through unimaginable trauma, lost everything, spent 2 years learning to walk again, to live again. She was 9 years younger than him, still rebuilding her life from ashes. He had a daughter to think about, a 6-year-old who adored Rebecca but who'd already been through one divorce and didn't need the complication of her father's romantic feelings potentially ruining the one stable adult friendship she'd found. And most importantly, what if he was wrong? What if Rebecca saw him only as a friend, the kind man who'd let her share his table, nothing more? What if telling her scared her away and he lost her entirely? So Marcus said nothing. He smiled, laughed at her story about the client, changed the subject, kept his feelings locked down tight, a secret he carried alone. August arrived with a heat wave that turned Portland into a sauna. The city, built for rain and mild summers, had no idea how to handle 95 degrees. Marcus's apartment had no air conditioning. Neither did Rebecca's studio. They spent a Saturday afternoon at Laurelhurst Park's public pool, Emily practicing her doggy paddle while Marcus and Rebecca sat on the edge with their feet in the water, talking about nothing important, avoiding the weight of everything Marcus wasn't saying. Rebecca had started doing freelance work for Marcus's school, designing flyers for the fall open house, redoing the drama department's website. She came to Emily's summer art camp showcase, took photos like a proud aunt, helped Marcus hang Emily's paintings on the refrigerator when they got home. Late-night texts had become routine. Marcus would be up grading summer school assignments, Rebecca working on a logo redesign for a Portland coffee roaster, and they'd text back and forth for hours. Funny observations about their days, links to articles they thought the other would like, sometimes deeper conversations about grief, about rebuilding, about the strange way life continued even when you thought it couldn't. One night in mid-August, Rebecca asked, "Do you ever feel guilty for being happy?" Marcus stared at his phone, choosing his words carefully. After the divorce? After anything, after loss. Like being happy is somehow betraying what you lost. He thought about that. Sometimes. Angela and I weren't happy together, but I still felt guilty when I realized I was happier without her, like I should have tried harder, been someone different. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I felt happy today. Really happy, not just okay. And immediately felt like I was betraying my family. Like I don't deserve to be happy when they're gone. Marcus's chest tightened. He typed, "Your family would want you to be happy. I didn't know them, but I know they would want that for you." "How do you know?" "Because they loved you enough to make Saturday mornings at a cafe the best part of their week. That kind of love doesn't stop wanting good things for you just because they're not here to see it." The response took longer this time. When it came, it was simple. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Then, a minute later, "I'm really glad you said yes that day, when I asked to share your table." Marcus smiled at his phone. "I'm really glad you asked." They texted until after midnight, and Marcus fell asleep on the couch with his phone still in his hand, feeling simultaneously more content and more conflicted than he'd felt in years. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late August. Marcus was at his kitchen table, reorganizing his lesson plans for the fall semester that would start in 2 weeks. Emily was coloring nearby, working on an elaborate drawing of what she claimed was a dragon but looked more like a very angry chicken. His phone rang, Angela's name on the screen. He answered, expecting logistics, asking to switch a weekend, confirming Emily's school supply list, the mundane coordination of shared custody. "Hey, is everything okay?" Angela's voice was different, excited, energized in a way he hadn't heard in years. "Yes, actually, I'm calling with good news. I got a job offer at the Portland Art Museum, senior curator position with a path to director within 2 years. It's exactly what I've been working toward, Marcus, and it means I'd be moving back to Portland." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. "You're moving back here?" "I've been thinking about it for a while, even before this job came up. Seeing Emily twice a month isn't enough. I've regretted not being more present in her life. I want to be a real mom to her, not just a visitor who shows up every other weekend with presents and promises." Marcus processed this. On one level, it was good news. Emily would love having Angela nearby. But something in Angela's tone suggested there was more. "There's something else I wanted to talk about." Her voice softened, became careful. "I've been doing a lot of therapy, a lot of self-reflection over the past year, and I've been thinking about us, about our marriage." Everything in Marcus went very still. "Hear me out," Angela continued quickly. "We were so young when we got married. 22, barely out of college, no idea who we really were. We let stress and our differences pull us apart. I wanted spontaneity and you wanted stability, and we couldn't figure out how to give each other both. But maybe we gave up too quickly. Maybe with some time and growth and maturity, we could try again." Marcus couldn't speak. His brain had short-circuited somewhere between therapy and try again. "I'm not saying immediately," Angela clarified. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. But think about it, Marcus. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. A real family, both her parents together, giving her the stability and love she deserves. We could do it right this time. We're not the same people we were at 22. The words came automatically, muscle memory from years of being careful with Angela's feelings. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now. Just think about it. I'll be moving back in about 6 weeks, mid-October. We'll have time to figure things out." After they hung up, Marcus sat frozen at the kitchen table. The lesson plans in front of him might as well have been written in another language. Emily looked up from her coloring. "Was that Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Is she coming to visit soon?" Marcus took a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "Actually, Mommy might be moving back to Portland for a new job." Emily's face exploded with joy. Her crayon clattered to the table as she bounced in her seat. "Really? Mommy's coming back here? That's the best news ever." She scrambled out of her chair and into Marcus's lap, throwing her arms around his neck. "Oh, Daddy, this is so great. I can see her all the time instead of just sometimes. And maybe..." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with hope that made Marcus's stomach sink. "Maybe if she's here, you and Mommy could be together again, like a real family, like Harper's parents. We could all live together and I wouldn't have to pack a bag to go back and forth and we could have dinner together every night and—" "Sweetie," Marcus gently interrupted the cascade of words. "It's not that simple." "But it could be. If Mommy's here and you're here, you could fall back in love. That happens in movies all the time. And then we'd be a real family and everything would be perfect." Marcus held his daughter, her small body vibrating with excitement, and didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that love isn't a switch you can flip back on? That real family doesn't require everyone living under the same roof? That sometimes the people we love want things we can't give them, and that's nobody's fault? "We'll see, baby girl. Let's just focus on Mommy moving back first, okay?" Emily nodded, satisfied with that non-answer, and returned to her dragon chicken drawing. But Marcus sat there long after she'd moved on, staring at nothing, his mind spinning in circles. That Saturday at the morning blend, Rebecca immediately sensed something was off. Marcus was distracted, quieter than usual, barely touching his coffee. His responses to Emily's stories came on autopilot, half a beat too slow. Rebecca waited until Emily skipped off to examine the pastry display case, debating the merits of a chocolate croissant versus a cinnamon roll. "Hey," her voice was gentle. "What's going on? You're somewhere else today." Marcus sighed, rubbed his face with both hands. "Angela called. She got a job offer in Portland. She's moving back." "Oh." Something flickered across Rebecca's face, too quick for Marcus to read. That's good though, right? Emily will get to see her more." Yeah, it'll be good for Emily." Rebecca waited, clearly sensing there was more. "Is there something else?" Marcus hesitated. How could he explain? How could he tell her that Angela wanted to try again, that his ex-wife had suggested rekindling their marriage, that he was confused about what any of it meant, that he was terrified of what it might do to this fragile, perfect thing they'd built over these past 4 months? "Just a lot of changes coming, a lot to figure out." Rebecca nodded slowly, accepting that non-answer even though her eyes suggested she knew he was holding something back. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he paid the bill and they walked out into another humid August afternoon, was that later, when he stepped away to take a call from his sister, Emily would tell Rebecca everything. They were sitting on a bench in Laurelhurst Park, Marcus 20 feet away on his phone, Emily swinging her legs and working through a strawberry popsicle that was melting faster than she could eat it. "Guess what, Miss Rebecca?" Emily's voice carried that particular vibrating excitement that meant big news. "My mommy is moving back to Portland." Rebecca smiled, wiping a drip of strawberry juice off Emily's chin with a napkin. "I heard. That's wonderful, Emily. You'll get to see her so much more." "I know. And I told Daddy that maybe they could fall in love again and we could all be a family together. Isn't that the best idea ever? Then I'd have both my parents in the same house like before they got divorced, like a real family." Something inside Rebecca's chest cracked, a hairline fracture that would only widen with time. She kept her smile in place through sheer force of will. That would be really wonderful for you, Emily." "I really hope it happens," Emily continued, oblivious to the way Rebecca's grip had tightened on the bench. "I pray about it every night. I want my mommy and daddy together again. Then everything would be perfect." "I hope you get everything you want," Rebecca managed, and meant it, even as her heart was quietly breaking. That night, Rebecca lay awake in her studio apartment, staring at the ceiling while rain drummed against the window. Portland's summer heat had finally broken, giving way to the kind of steady drizzle that would persist through October. Of course Marcus would want his family back together. Of course he'd choose to give Emily what she desperately wanted, both her parents, a complete family unit. What could Rebecca possibly offer that would compare to that? She was just some girl who'd stumbled into their lives at a cafe, broken and grieving, taking up space at their table. Marcus had never indicated he saw her as anything more than a friend. She'd been foolish to let herself fall in love with him, foolish to imagine he might feel the same way. He'd been kind to her, incredibly, life-changingly kind, but that didn't mean he loved her. That didn't mean she had any right to stand in the way of Emily getting her intact family back. Rebecca had already lost one family to circumstances beyond her control. She wouldn't be the reason Emily lost hers a second time. The decision crystallized sometime around 3 in the morning. She would pull back, slowly, carefully, so as not to hurt Emily. She'd make excuses, create distance, give Marcus and Angela the space they needed to figure things out. It would hurt. God, it would hurt worse than the amputation, worse than waking up in the hospital to learn everyone she loved was gone. But it was the right thing to do. Rebecca had learned to survive impossible things. She could survive this too. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus watched their carefully constructed world begin to fracture and had no idea why. Friday night movie at his place? Rebecca texted that she was swamped with a big freelance deadline. Really sorry, next time for sure. Saturday morning coffee? She wasn't feeling great. Could they rain check? The following Saturday? She had to drive to Vancouver to help her aunt with something, would be gone all day. Marcus tried calling. It went to voicemail. He texted, "Did I do something wrong? Please talk to me. I miss you." The response came 4 hours later. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just think I've been imposing too much on your time with Emily. You two need your space, especially with everything changing." Marcus stared at that message, completely baffled. Imposing? She was part of their family now. How could she possibly think she was imposing? He started to type a response, deleted it, started again. Finally settled on, "You're not imposing? You're never imposing. Is this about Angela?" This time the response took 6 hours. "I just need some space right now. I'm sorry." Emily noticed immediately, of course. The third Saturday morning without Rebecca, she looked around the morning blend with confused, wounded eyes. "Where's Miss Rebecca? Why doesn't she come anymore?" Marcus kept his voice gentle. "She's just busy, sweetie. She has a lot of work right now." "But she was never too busy before." Emily's voice got small, the way it did when she was trying not to cry. "Did we do something to make her mad?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why doesn't she want to see us anymore?" Marcus didn't have an answer. "I don't know." Emily pushed her pancakes around her plate without eating, and Marcus's coffee sat untouched and cold. The morning blend felt wrong without Rebecca. The whole world felt wrong without Rebecca. That evening, after putting Emily to bed, Marcus sat on his couch trying to make sense of everything. Rebecca's withdrawal had started right after he'd mentioned Angela moving back. Emily had been so excited about her parents potentially getting back together. Stara had been vocal about it, hopeful in that innocent, absolute way children had. Unless... The realization hit him like a freight train. Emily must have told Rebecca about wanting her parents back together, and Rebecca, sweet Rebecca who'd lost her entire family, probably thought she was standing in the way of Emily getting hers back. She was sacrificing her own happiness, their friendship, everything they'd built, because she thought it was the right thing to do for Emily. Marcus grabbed his keys. 20 minutes later he was knocking on Rebecca's apartment door. It was 11:15 at night, past any reasonable hour for an unannounced visit, but he couldn't wait. Couldn't let another day pass with this misunderstanding between them. Rebecca opened the door in sweatpants and an oversized Portland State hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Surprise and something like panic flashed across her face when she saw him. "Marcus? Is Emily?" "She's fine. She's with Mrs. Patterson next door. We need to talk. Please." Rebecca hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Her studio was exactly as he remembered from moving day. Small, cozy, photos of her family everywhere. They sat on her second-hand couch, the same one where they'd eaten pizza in June, where everything had still been simple and uncomplicated. Marcus turned to face her directly. "You're pulling away because of Angela, aren't you?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears immediately, confirming everything. Emily told you. It wasn't a question. She told me she's excited about Angela moving back, and you think you're standing in the way of her getting her family back together? Rebecca looked down at her hands twisting in her lap, couldn't meet his eyes. She deserves it, Marcus. Both her parents loving each other, all living together. After everything with the divorce, after all the back and forth and confusion, she deserves that fairy tale ending. Look at me. Please. She met his eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. Marcus kept his voice firm. Angela and I are not getting back together. But she wants to. She mentioned it as a possibility. He cut her off gently. And I haven't considered it seriously for even a second. Angela and I don't belong together. We never really did. We were young and in love with the idea of love, but we weren't compatible as life partners. That hasn't changed. Moving to the same city doesn't change that fundamental truth. But Emily wants... Emily is 6 years old. She has fantasies about fairy tale endings where everyone lives happily ever after in the same house. But that's not reality, and that's not what's best for her. Angela and I can both be excellent parents to Emily without being married to each other. Emily will understand that as she gets older. Rebecca was crying harder now, but Marcus wasn't finished. These past 4 months have been some of the happiest months of my life since my divorce. Not because of convenience or circumstance, because of you. Her breath caught. Because you make me laugh in ways I forgot I could. Because the way you see the world fascinates me. You find beauty and meaning in things I'd walk right past. Because you're kind and you're real and you're resilient in ways that humble me. His voice cracked slightly. When I'm with you, everything feels right in a way it never felt with Angela. Not even at the beginning when we thought we were in love. It never felt like this. Tears were streaming down Rebecca's face. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's the truth. Marcus took both her hands in his. They were shaking. You're not standing in the way of anything, Rebecca. You're not an obstacle to my family. You are my family. You have been since that day you asked to share our table. He took a shaky breath, committed now, no going back. I love you. I'm in love with you. I have been for weeks, maybe months. And I hope, you might feel the same way. Rebecca stared at him, tears streaming, breath coming in ragged gasps. For a terrifying moment Marcus thought he'd miscalculated, that he'd just destroyed everything. Then, I do. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been falling in love with you since you sang Happy Birthday to a stranger and made her feel seen. Since you let me share your table without hesitation. Since you've been kind and patient and wonderful to me every single day. But I couldn't let myself hope. I thought I was being selfish. I couldn't. Marcus pulled her into his arms and she sobbed against his chest, months of suppressed feelings pouring out. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. You're allowed to hope, he murmured into her hair. You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to be loved, Rebecca. You're allowed to be happy. She pulled back to look at him through her tears. I love you, Marcus, so much. And I love Emily. But I'm so scared. Of what? Of messing this up. Of you realizing I'm not enough. Of Emily resenting me for not being her mother. Of... Marcus kissed her. It was soft and gentle and full of months of unspoken longing, full of all the words he'd been too afraid to say. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You are enough. You are more than enough. And we'll figure everything out together. Angela moving back, the new co-parenting arrangement, all of it. But please don't pull away from us. Don't leave us. We need you. I won't leave, Rebecca promised, her hands clutching his shirt like a lifeline. I'm sorry I tried to. I'm so sorry. You don't have to apologize. You were trying to do what you thought was right. But Rebecca, he pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. You being in our lives is what's right. Emily adores you. I love you. That's what matters. They held each other for a long time, the Portland rain continuing its steady rhythm against the window, washing away fear and doubt and leaving only the truth between them. Sometime around 1 a.m., still tangled together on her couch, Rebecca asked, "What do we do now?" Marcus thought about that. "Now I go home and get some sleep. Tomorrow I talk to Emily, help her understand that her mom and I can both be there for her without being married. And then," he smiled, "then we figure out what this is. Together." "Together," Rebecca repeated, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." Marcus kissed her again, slower this time, memorizing the moment, then forced himself to stand, to leave, because if he didn't go now, he never would. At her door, he turned back. "Saturday morning coffee? Our usual table?" Rebecca's smile was radiant. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Marcus drove home through empty streets, rain streaking across his windshield, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Mrs. Patterson was asleep on his couch, startled awake when he came in. "Everything okay?" she asked groggily. "Yeah." Marcus couldn't stop smiling. "Everything's perfect. Thank you for watching Emily." After Mrs. Patterson left, Marcus collapsed into bed and immediately passed out, his phone buzzing on the nightstand with a text from Rebecca. "Thank you for not giving up on me." He texted back, "Never. Sleep well. I love you." "I love you too." Marcus fell asleep smiling, unaware that the hardest conversations were still ahead, that love alone couldn't solve everything, that choosing Rebecca meant navigating complications he couldn't yet imagine. But for now, for tonight, it was enough to know she felt the same way, that he hadn't imagined the connection between them, that sometimes saying yes to a stranger at a cafe table led to something extraordinary, something worth fighting for, something that felt like coming home. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline September light that made Portland look like a postcard. Marcus woke early, adrenaline replacing the need for coffee. Today, he'd talk to Emily. Today, everything would become real. He made pancakes, Emily's favorite, the kind with chocolate chips arranged into smiley faces, and waited for her to shuffle into the kitchen in her dinosaur pajamas, hair sticking up at angles that defied physics. She climbed into her chair, eyeing the pancakes with suspicion. "Why are you making fancy breakfast? It's not my birthday." Marcus sat across from her, suddenly unsure how to begin. "I wanted to talk to you about something important, about Mommy moving back to Portland." Emily's face lit up immediately. "Is she coming sooner? Can I help her find an apartment? Does she—" "Sweetie, let me finish." He kept his voice gentle. "Mommy moving back is wonderful. You'll get to see her so much more often. But I need you to understand something. Mommy and Daddy are not getting back together." The light in Emily's eyes dimmed. Her fork clattered to the plate. "But why? If she's here—" "Because sometimes people care about each other and realize they're better as friends than as married people. We tried really hard when we were married, but we weren't happy together the way married people should be. We made each other sad more than we made each other happy." Emily's lower lip trembled. "But I want us all to be together." "I know, baby. I understand why you want that." Marcus reached across the table, taking her small hands in his. "But you are together with us, just in a different way. You have Mommy who loves you more than anything. You have Daddy who loves you more than anything. We're both here for you. That's what matters, not whether we live in the same house or are married to each other." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then her voice small. "Is it because of Miss Rebecca?" Marcus took a breath. "No. Mommy and I made our choice to divorce long before I ever met Miss Rebecca. That was our decision, and it was the right one for both of us." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I do need to tell you something about Miss Rebecca. I love her, Emily. Not just as a friend, but the way grown-ups love each other when they want to be together." Emily's eyes widened. Like boyfriend and girlfriend? Yes, exactly like that. His daughter was quiet for another long moment, her 6-year-old mind working through emotions more complex than any first grader should have to navigate. Marcus braced himself for tears, for anger, for the tantrum that seemed inevitable. Instead, Emily's expression softened. I like Miss Rebecca. She's really nice. And you smile a lot when she's around. You laugh more. Something in Marcus's chest loosened. I do smile more when she's around. I still wish you and Mommy could be together, Emily admitted, her honesty absolute. But I guess if you're happy with Miss Rebecca, that's okay too. She climbed out of her chair and into Marcus's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. He held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, wondering how he'd gotten so lucky to have a daughter with this much capacity for understanding. Can Miss Rebecca still come to Saturday coffee with us? Marcus felt his eyes burn. Always, sweetheart. Always. 6 weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and revelation. Angela moved back to Portland in mid-October, finding a sleek apartment in the Pearl District with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. They reworked their custody arrangement. Emily would stay with Angela every other weekend and one weeknight for dinner. It took some calibration, some tears from Emily about having to remember which house had which toys, but they managed. The first time Angela came to pick up Emily from Marcus's apartment, she met Rebecca. It was a Thursday evening, Emily's new dinner night. Angela arrived precisely at 5:30, knocking twice before letting herself in with the key Marcus had given her for emergencies. She walked into a domestic scene that must have felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Rebecca at the kitchen counter helping Emily with math homework, Marcus stirring something on the stove that smelled like his grandmother's chicken soup recipe. Emily squealed and launched herself at Angela, chattering about her day at school, the new girl in her class who had the same light-up shoes, the substitute teacher who let them have extra recess. While Emily ran to her room to pack her overnight bag, Angela and Rebecca stood in the awkward silence of two women connected only by circumstance. Angela was exactly as Rebecca had pictured from Marcus's descriptions. Tall, striking in the way artists often were, with paint-stained fingers even in her professional curator clothes, and expressive dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of Marcus's apartment, noting what had changed and what remained the same. "So you're Rebecca." Angela's voice was neutral, careful. "Emily talks about you constantly. Miss Rebecca taught me this. Miss Rebecca said that. She clearly loves you." Rebecca's hands twisted together, an old nervous habit she hadn't been able to break. "I'm not trying to replace you. You're Emily's mother. I would never—" "I know," Angela interrupted, and to Rebecca's shock she smiled, genuinely. "I can see it in how you are with her. And I can see you make Marcus happy in ways I never could." She glanced toward the kitchen where Marcus was very obviously pretending not to listen. "I thought I wanted to try again with him when I decided to move back. But the truth is, I was lonely in Seattle. I confused wanting to be a better mom with wanting to be his wife again. Those are two different things." Angela looked back at Rebecca, and something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "I'm actually glad he found you. Take care of them. They're both pretty special." Rebecca's eyes watered. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Emily emerged from her room dragging a backpack that seemed to contain half her belongings. Angela helped redistribute the weight, kissed Marcus on the cheek in that casual way ex-spouses sometimes achieved when the wounds had fully healed, and left with promises to have Emily back by 7 tomorrow night. After they'd gone, Rebecca turned to Marcus. "That went better than I expected. Angela's a good person. We were terrible at being married to each other, but she's not vindictive. She wants Emily to be happy, and Emily's happy when we're all getting along." Rebecca leaned against the counter, watching him finish making soup. Neither of them was particularly hungry for any more. "Do you think Emily will be okay with all of this?" I think kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, and I think as long as we're honest with her and show up consistently, she'll adapt." He turned off the stove, moved toward Rebecca. "The question is, are you okay?" She considered that. "I'm terrified, but I'm also happier than I've been since before the accident. Is it possible to be both at once?" Marcus pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I think that's just what love feels like when you've lost enough to know how fragile it is." 3 months later, Angela brought a guest to Emily's winter concert at Bridgeport Middle School. Her name was Laura Chen, art restorer, quiet and observant, with an easy smile and the kind of calm presence that suggested she'd learned patience from working with centuries-old paintings that couldn't be rushed. Angela introduced her to Marcus and Rebecca during intermission, Emily having disappeared with her classmates for the second half of the program. Laura shook their hands, made small talk about the impressive student artwork lining the hallways, mentioned she'd gone to school for conservation at the Winterthur Museum. After they'd moved on to get coffee from the cafeteria, Rebecca leaned close to Marcus. "She seems nice?" "Yeah." Marcus was surprised by how much he meant it. "She does." Watching Angela laugh at something Laura whispered, seeing the easy affection between them, Marcus realized he felt nothing but relief. No jealousy, no regret, no sense of loss. Just genuine happiness that Angela had found someone who fit her better than he ever had. Over the following months, Angela and Rebecca developed an unexpected friendship built on their shared investment in Emily's well-being. They texted about Emily's upcoming field trip permission slips, coordinated who would handle Halloween costume shopping, split the work of organizing Emily's 7th birthday party in March. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments of tension over different parenting approaches, awkward navigations of holidays. But they managed it with more grace than anyone had expected. 8 months after that first morning at the Morning Blend, on a Saturday in late March that felt like an echo of the day they'd met, Marcus got down on one knee at table 7. The cafe was exactly as crowded as it had been that first Saturday. Couples on dates, students with laptops, families creating their own traditions. But at table 7, time compressed into a single crystalline moment. Emily stood beside Marcus, practically vibrating with excitement, holding a small velvet box in both hands like it contained the secrets of the universe. The cafe gradually quieted as people noticed what was happening. Marcus took Rebecca's hand, his own shaking slightly. "Rebecca Hayes, that day you asked to share our table, you changed our lives completely. You brought light and laughter back into our world when I didn't even realize how much darkness I'd been accepting as normal. You showed me what real partnership looks like, the kind where both people get to be fully themselves." His voice wavered with emotion. "You've been patient with Emily's adjustment. You've been gracious with Angela. You've been everything I didn't know I needed." He paused, gathering himself. "Will you marry us? Will you officially become part of our family?" Rebecca was crying and laughing simultaneously, her hand covering her mouth. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Emily opened the box to reveal a simple ring, white gold, with a small diamond that caught the morning light. Nothing ostentatious, just honest and real. Marcus slipped it onto Rebecca's finger and kissed her while the whole cafe erupted in applause. The same patrons who'd sung Happy Birthday 8 months ago, who'd witnessed the beginning of this story without knowing they were witnessing anything at all, now celebrated its next chapter. The owner rushed over with champagne for Marcus and Rebecca, hot chocolate for Emily, announcing loudly that everything was on the house. Someone at the back of the cafe shouted, "To the family that started at table 7. Everyone raised their cups, coffee mugs, water glasses, whatever they had, in a toast to love and second chances and the strange magic of saying yes to strangers. Emily threw her arms around both Marcus and Rebecca, creating a 3-person tangle of limbs and laughter and tears. Rebecca kept looking at the ring on her finger like she couldn't quite believe it was real, that she'd gone from the loneliest birthday of her life to this, to being chosen, to having a family again. Later, after the excitement died down and they'd finished their coffee and cake, chocolate with vanilla buttercream, of course, the owner wouldn't hear of anything else, they walked through the neighborhood hand in hand. Emily skipped ahead, periodically running back to hug Rebecca and announce to random strangers that her dad had just proposed, and wasn't it the most romantic thing ever? 6 months, Rebecca said suddenly. Can we do the wedding in 6 months? I don't want a long engagement. I've waited long enough for this. Marcus pulled her close, kissed her temple. 6 months sounds perfect. They spent the spring planning a wedding that would be small and meaningful rather than elaborate. Rebecca wanted it at the Morning Blend, where else? And the owner was thrilled to close the cafe for a Saturday morning, transforming the space with simple white flowers and strings of lights that made everything feel both celebratory and intimate. Emily appointed herself wedding coordinator, taking the role with deadly seriousness. She helped Rebecca pick out a dress, simple ivory, tea-length, nothing that screamed traditional bridal, but everything that whispered joy. She insisted on being flower girl and convinced Angela to help her practice walking at exactly the right speed with exactly the right basket of petals. Angela attended the final dress fitting, bringing Laura along. The 4 women, Rebecca, Angela, Laura, and Emily, spent an afternoon at a boutique in Northwest Portland, drinking champagne, well, sparkling cider for Emily, and laughing about the absurdity of asking a 7-year-old for fashion advice. "You look beautiful," Angela said when Rebecca emerged in the final dress, the one that fit perfectly. "Marcus won't know what hit him." Rebecca caught Angela's eye in the mirror, seeing only genuine warmth there. "Thank you for being okay with all of this, for making it easy. Emily's happy. Marcus is happy. That's what matters." Angela raised her champagne glass. "To complicated families that somehow work." They all clinked glasses, even Emily with her sparkling cider. And in that moment Rebecca understood that family wasn't about biology or marriage certificates or living under the same roof. It was about showing up for each other, about choosing love even when it would be easier to choose resentment, about making room at your table for whoever needed a place to belong. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday morning in mid-September. The cafe had been transformed overnight. White roses and peonies on every surface, string lights crisscrossing the ceiling, chairs arranged in neat rows facing table 7 where Marcus and Rebecca would exchange vows. Emily wore her green dress with white flowers, the one she'd chosen herself from 3 options, all of which had looked identical to Marcus, but were apparently completely different to his daughter. She carried a basket of white rose petals and wore her most serious expression, the one reserved for very important occasions. Angela sat in the front row with Laura, both of them dressed in soft pastels that complemented each other. Marcus's mother sat beside them, tears already streaming down her face even though nothing had happened yet. Rebecca's aunt represented her family, clutching a photo of Rebecca's parents and Kennedy like they were there in spirit, if not in body. Marcus stood at table 7 in a charcoal suit, no tie because Rebecca had vetoed ties as too stuffy for a cafe wedding. His hands shook slightly as he watched Rebecca walk toward him down an aisle that was really just the space between tables, led by Emily, who took her flower girl duties with such solemnity that people had to fight not to laugh. Rebecca looked radiant. No other word for it. The ivory dress caught the morning light streaming through the windows. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She carried a small bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus. And her smile was everything. Pure joy, unguarded and complete. When she reached him, when Emily handed off the flowers and scurried to stand with Angela, Marcus took both of Rebecca's hands in his. They'd decided to write their own vows, had spent weeks agonizing over getting the words exactly right. Marcus went first, his voice steady despite the emotion choking his throat. "Rebecca, when you asked to share our table that morning, you gave me more than coffee company. You gave me hope. You taught me that families aren't just born. They're built, one kind moment at a time. You showed Emily what resilience looks like. You showed me what love should feel like when it's right, when it's real, when it's with someone who sees all of you and chooses you anyway." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to always make room at our table for you, to celebrate every birthday like it's the most important day of the year, and to remind you every single day that you are exactly where you belong." Rebecca's hands trembled in his as she began her vows. "Marcus, I came to this cafe on the worst birthday of my life looking for ghosts, looking for any connection to the family I'd lost. Instead, I found a future. You and Emily didn't just let me share your table. You made room in your hearts for someone who felt like she'd never belong anywhere again." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "You taught me that grief and joy can exist together, that broken doesn't mean worthless, that family is what you make it, not what you're born into." Tears streamed freely now. "I promise to love you both with everything I have, to honor the family you've welcomed me into, and to never forget that the best things in life start with a simple question. Can I share this table?" Marcus kissed her then, before anyone could pronounce them anything, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Emily jumped up and down, shouting, "They're married! They're married!" to anyone who would listen. Someone, Marcus suspected it was the owner, started singing a modified version of Happy Birthday that became Happy Wedding Day, and soon half the cafe had joined in. They cut a small chocolate cake with vanilla buttercream frosting, the same kind from that first birthday. Rebecca closed her eyes before cutting the first slice, making a wish the way she had 8 months ago. But this time when she opened her eyes, she wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying from gratitude. The first dance happened in the narrow space between tables, Rebecca's head resting on Marcus's shoulder as an old jazz standard played from speakers the owner had set up. People swayed in their seats, smiling at the couple who'd gone from strangers to family in less than a year. Emily watched from Angela's lap, leaning against her mother with a satisfaction that suggested she'd orchestrated the whole thing. "Mommy, did you know that sometimes fairy tales are real? They just don't look like the ones in books." Angela kissed the top of her daughter's head, caught Marcus's eye across the room, and smiled. "You're absolutely right, baby." The reception lasted until early afternoon. People brought gifts, even though Marcus and Rebecca had insisted they didn't need anything. The owner refused payment for the venue, declaring that love stories that started at table 7 deserved to end there too. Marcus's teacher friends gave speeches that were equal parts heartfelt and embarrassing. Angela gave a toast that managed to be both gracious and genuine, welcoming Rebecca to the complicated but beautiful family they'd all created together. As the afternoon light slanted through the windows, golden and eternal, Rebecca found herself standing at table 7 with Marcus and Emily, the three of them reflected in the window against the backdrop of Southeast Hawthorne Street. "How did we get here?" she asked, but not like she wanted an answer, more like she was marveling at the improbability of it all. Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You asked if you could share our table, and I said yes." "Best yes I've ever said," Rebecca murmured. Emily wormed her way between them. "Best question you ever asked." They stood like that for a long moment, a family built from grief and kindness and the willingness to make room for one more person at a crowded table. 1 year later, the morning blend on a Saturday morning that could have been any Saturday morning except for the addition of a 3-month-old baby boy strapped to Marcus's chest in a carrier. Christopher Thompson had arrived in June, early but healthy, with Rebecca's eyes and Marcus's serious expression and a cry that could wake the entire neighborhood. Emily had appointed herself chief big sister, a role she took as seriously as she'd taken being flower girl, constantly checking if Christopher needed anything and reporting his every move to whoever would listen. They sat at table 7, always table 7, Marcus carefully maneuvering around the carrier, Rebecca looking exhausted but radiant, Emily chattering about her upcoming second-grade year. Angela and Laura joined them, having developed their own Saturday morning tradition of meeting Marcus's family for coffee before taking Emily to whatever adventure they'd planned for the weekend. The cafe buzzed with its usual Saturday energy: students with laptops, couples on dates, families creating memories. The owner brought their usual orders without being asked: black coffee for Marcus, Americano for Rebecca, hot chocolate with extra whipped cream for Emily, lattes for Angela and Laura. A young woman entered the cafe on a wheelchair, scanning for an empty seat in the packed space. She looked to be in her early 20s, brown hair pulled back, expression hovering between determination and defeat. Marcus watched her approach two different tables, watched her get turned away twice. Rebecca saw her too, caught Marcus's eye. They shared a look of perfect understanding. When the young woman wheeled toward their table, hesitant, Marcus and Rebecca both smiled before she could even speak. "Excuse me." Her voice was soft, uncertain. "I know this is probably strange, but is there room at this table?" Rebecca spoke first, her voice warm and welcoming and full of knowing. "Always. Please join us." The young woman's face transformed with relief so complete it was almost painful to witness. She settled into the space they made for her, introduced herself as Sarah, accepted the menu someone handed her. Emily launched into conversation with the unself-conscious enthusiasm only 7-year-olds possessed, asking Sarah about her favorite color, and whether she liked dogs or cats better, and did she want to see a picture of Emily's new hamster that was actually a gerbil, but the pet store lady said hamsters were easier to say. Marcus caught Angela's eye across the table. She raised her coffee cup in a subtle toast to strange families and second chances and the beautiful unpredictability of life. Laura smiled beside her, already absorbed in sketching something on a napkin, probably committing this moment to memory the way artists did. Christopher made a small sound against Marcus's chest, the kind that might turn into crying or might settle back into sleep. Rebecca reached over automatically, one hand on the baby's back, the other finding Marcus's under the table. Two families, blended beautifully, making room for one more, continuing the story that had started with 5 simple words and a willingness to say yes. Marcus Thompson could have said no that March morning 8 months ago, could have protected his quiet Saturday tradition, avoided the complications, kept his and Emily's life neat and uncomplicated, but he'd said yes to a stranger who needed it, and that one word had given him everything he hadn't known he was searching for. Their story had started with a birthday song and a slice of cake, with a young woman brave enough to ask for what she needed, and a single father kind enough to say yes. With one simple truth that changed 3 lives forever. Sometimes all it takes is making room at your table for someone who needs a place to belong, and sometimes that someone becomes your whole world. Have you ever said yes to a stranger and it changed everything? Or been the one asking, hoping someone would make room? Share your story below, because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the most beautiful endings.